Hey friends, thanks for joining me, Jim Baroud, to hear a few insights from leaders who represent our innovation ecosystem. Today's chat is with Linda Wellbrock, the CEO of Leading Women Entrepreneurs, and Andy Saldana, the Executive Director of the New York Tech Alliance. So let's start with ladies first. Linda, tell us about yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Linda Wellbrock. I am the CEO and founder of an organization called Leading Women Entrepreneurs. I've been in the world of the advancement of women leaders for over 13 plus years. And what I've learned is the power of positioning yourself as an authority. Our organization has recognized over 600 of the top women executives and entrepreneurs in the state of New Jersey, and we've built a database of about 20,000. So we have this really great environment of success where we know that there are women who believe in the power of innovation and also the power of advocating for other women. So again, the organization's mission is to raise the visibility platform for successful women leaders for two reasons: to position themselves as authorities so that they grow their own businesses and their own brands, but also to inspire the next generation of women leaders to come. And by, reading these stories and creating a community, it really helps everyone lift each other up personally and professionally. And I feel very privileged to have built the ecosystem that my organization has been privileged to build over the past decade. So I don't know if you want me to go further, but
that's a perfect start.
Yeah.
Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Andy Saldana, I'm the Executive Director of New York Tech Alliance. And New York Tech Alliance is a nonprofit organization based in New York City, driving access, equity, and inclusion within the New York tech ecosystem with the goal of making it one of the most successful in the world. And I've been at the organization for about 8 years now. Time really does fly. And it's really interesting to see how the icosystem, the New York tech ecosystem specifically, has really grown, matured, changed over the last couple of years. And just kind of thinking back to when I first started with the organization and really not knowing a lot about New York, not knowing a lot about the startup ecosystem in New York, about startups, period. I was very, very green to the industry, and just to be at that moment in 2013 when things were starting to bubble up and get really exciting, and then see the growth over time to what it is today has been remarkable. And just my own, I kind of track my own journey along with that of learning what entrepreneurship is and learning all of the different ways that it can be integrated into your career and what you're looking to do in the future. So much so that I started my own nonprofit in Montreal with a friend of mine called Queer Tech, a very similar goal about creating access and equity within the tech ecosystem, very focused on LGBTQ techies and technologists. And so making sure that people understand that there's a pathway into technology, that there's a opportunity for advancement, and that there's great opportunity for creating your own products and services. And so just trying to create those inspiring stories and tell those inspiring stories as well. There's so many amazing people within the community that are doing such phenomenal things. So I think storytelling is at the core of both organizations and what we are all about when we talk about building community.
That's great. And Andy, I look forward to learning more about the Montreal organization. I think that's fascinating. Their ecosystem is burgeoning right now, and it's really interesting to look at the tale of two cities, right? Potentially. So let's take a step back. Linda, you gave us a sort of a profile of what you do now. Talk to us about your journey, your career.
So I started in the financial industry, and I had a calling for something more. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs can resonate with this, is that they really feel almost like a misfit in corporate America because they have this DNA of innovation. But when you're younger, you don't really know what that is, right? So I had a calling for something more, and I applied to get a scholarship to the Rothman Institute, or to Fairleigh Dickinson University in Madison. My undergrad was Northeastern, and I got the scholarship, but in order to fulfill the scholarship, you had to work at the university. So by a twist of fate, I ended up getting a job at the Rothman Institute of Entrepreneurial Studies. And really, that's where my passion for innovation ignited. Jim was actually my boss back then. And I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I knew that this was going to be my club. I saw all of these very passionate entrepreneurs, and I loved that they were kind of creating their own worlds and their own destiny. And I was just this young girl who my undergrad was in journalism, and I thought, how am I going to get into this club? So I studied it academically. And then when I graduated, I ended up working as the associate publisher for a woman's magazine. And so there was a theme, even while I was studying, of the challenges that women had as entrepreneurs versus men. And then I went and worked for this women's publication, and that theme got even stronger for me. And I really saw some of the challenges that I thought, maybe this is something that I can help solve. So in 2009, I went out on my own and I launched an events company that I was trying to tangibly address the major challenges that hold women entrepreneurs back. And for those of you who don't know, those challenges there's a long list, but the top ones are access to capital, access to strong networks compared to our male counterparts, and access to good marketing opportunities, because there's lots of ways to say this and there's all studies on it, but women just don't like to talk about themselves, right? It's considered bragging and all of that. So really marketing yourself is a challenge. So I went out on my own and launched a Shark Tank type of event before Shark Tank, I think, even existed, and had pitch rooms for women to pitch to investors and to media and to buyers from all sorts of different places. And that set me on this path. In 2011, I decided to laser focus on the positioning and the branding and the marketing end of it, and partnered with some big media outlets, originally New Jersey Monthly Magazine. And we launched essentially a custom publishing marketing organization for women. So we've created many, many magazines about successful women in the state of New Jersey. Like I said, those, by recognizing these women, it's created a ripple effect of impact. So lots of the women have gained business from each other. Lots of the women have gained business from some of the marketing that they have received from this organization. And lots of the women have gotten mentors and mentored others. So I'm really proud that the system has sort of created a lot of opportunities for a lot of different people. And like I said earlier, I feel privileged every day that I get to, interview and be inspired by and connect with some of the thought leaders and influencers in this great state. So that's how it started. And like I said, it started with Jim. So I'm so honored to be back.
Well, thank you for that, Linda. And I was just lucky to have you as a graduate assistant. Actually, that was really a great experience, and you were great to work with. So, and I'm privileged to see your success so far. Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, so I kind of took the opposite path towards entrepreneurship. So I started in the events industry, and before that, I was much more kind of just finding my way in the world, basically. I went to the University of Texas in Austin for my undergrad, and then I graduated in 2001. So it was very similar to the situation now. Very little opportunity for recent graduates, and trying to figure out, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I lost an internship because of the bubble burst, and I was just like, I have no idea what I want to do. So I actually went into banking. I got a job as a teller at JP Morgan Chase right out of college. Quickly realized that, like Linda said, corporate America was very tough to be in if for a person like me, I just did not fit into the mold of like coming into work and doing the, it just was not for me. And I was always bored. So I was always trying to advance myself faster than I think a lot of people thought I was ready. And I hit that argument quite a lot. So I moved to San Francisco to get out of Austin. I had been there for quite a while. And on a whim, I went out to visit. I fell in love with the city. And it really opened up my perspective. I came out as a gay man. I really fell into the queer culture in San Francisco. The city at the time was phenomenal. And I didn't transfer bank, but I got another job as a teller, and it really set me up to meeting all these great people. And I became a merchant teller. So I started interacting with these businesses every day that coming in to make the deposits. And I was just like, wow, I'm meeting some very interesting people from businesses all over. And we were based in Soma. So there were a few tech companies, there were a few nonprofits, and it was really, really great to see just all of these different variety of businesses that were banking at the bank I worked at. And through the networking piece, I got my next job as a nonprofit, in nonprofit, working as an operations manager. And so it just kind of built, my experience just built on itself. And it was all through connections I was making, personal connections I was making while I was working. And that led to a job in the events industry. And I fell in love with the events industry. It's one of the greatest things I've ever discovered. And I like brought all of my talents together: how to organize, how to create, how to connect, how to inspire, how to tell stories. And so it was just a lot of fun. And I was in charge of logistics for huge trade shows like Interop and Black Hat USA. And I worked on the GDC conference. I got to go to Abu Dhabi for Black Hat. So it was a really amazing eye-opening opportunity, and it just taught me a lot about like how to create something from nothing, and how to do it on a timeline. And I think those are the two biggest skills that I learned during that piece, was just how to manage teams, work with teams, and do it all on a timeline. Because there was we got to push that out a week, right? Like the deadline was the deadline. The show had to open on the specific date, and you had to just roll with the punches and figure out, problem solve really, really quickly. So when I moved to New York many years later, I was like, okay, I'm a little exhausted traveling. I'm a little exhausted doing the same shows every year, and it was great because I was getting exposure to these amazing technology companies. I managed a show called Enterprise 2.0, and we would bring speakers from Amazon and Google and the early startups like Box and Dropbox to come and talk about cloud computing and the future of cloud. And I was just like, I have no idea what this means. This is whatever. I'm just here to do the logistics. And I hadn't realized how much of that was seeping in as I was working in those roles. And I was learning all about this amazing technology. And so when I moved to New York, I was like, I need something else. I got introduced through a friend to Jessica Lawrence Quinn at the time. She was the executive director of New York Tech Meetup. And we hit it off instantly. And she was looking for someone to manage the events. I was like, I know nothing about entrepreneurship, but I'll figure it out. And it was the best decision I ever made. Moving, and it's scary, right? Like we talk a lot about this in the entrepreneurial journey, about when to decide to go full time, what you're going to give up to pursue certain things. And although when I joined the organization, there was security, right? There was a paycheck, there was insurance, and then there was a guarantee of at least a year. So I was like, okay, I'm good with this. But I was leaving, a 401k and tenure at this company, and all of these things I had spent the last 8 years kind of building towards. And it was really, taking a deep breath and taking a leap, and to work for this small nonprofit organization that's based in New York City. And how do you tell your mom? I'm giving it all up to work for this nonprofit. And it was not a good conversation, but anyhow, I've been there for 8.5 years now. I took over as executive director about 2.5 years ago. And it's just been, I'm amazed at how much I've learned over the last couple of years of what it takes to build startups, all the amazing, inspiring startup stories that I've gotten to hear, and interact with these phenomenal founders, right, from all over New York City, and they're building amazing companies. And when I started, we were having, Shutterstock was on stage, Peloton demoed on our stage, MongoDB would come and demo, Tumblr would come and demo, Meetup, Scott Heiferman would come and demo regularly. So it's just really inspiring to be in the room with all of these brilliant minds, creating these really awesome companies, and it's contagious. I'm like, oh my gosh, finally, all those years of people telling me you're trying to move too fast, or you don't have the right experience, or you need to figure out, you need to wait your turn. I got told that a lot throughout my career. You need to wait your turn, and I just could never understand. I'm like, I'm doing the job, I'm doing it well, I'm exceeding expectations. So what's the next challenge, right? Like, tell me what's next. And I didn't realize that you could create your own next step. And it's been really fulfilling I think that was a light bulb moment for me when I was like, oh, I can do this. I can make this happen. And it's been really, really phenomenal to think back on that journey, to see where I'm at. And it's also scary. It's like, there's so much more ahead, and I don't know what that is. Let me figure out how to make that happen.
That's great. Thank you, Andy. And thank you, Linda. Both those are really interesting perspectives. And I think a lot of people can relate to what you both went through in different ways. So Linda, tell us about what you're seeing, and you've been doing this for over 10 years, right? What you see in the community of entrepreneurs that you oversee in New Jersey and beyond. How have you seen it change? And how have you seen folks deal with this terrible pandemic this year?
Well, I'm sure Andy and I are both in the same place. I mean, as the founder of a media and events company who thrives on creating something out of nothing under a deadline. So Andy, I loved how you summarized that, because when you're in the events business, the show is going on. There's no tomorrow, right? So having had events with 500, 700 women, and having had the pandemic hit, that was really, in March last year, really scary. Like, yeah, that's out of season. So, I mean, that's an obvious change. In terms of what has happened over the last decade for the challenges that hold women back, access to capital has always been the top challenge. The statistics have moved slightly in the right direction, but not at all near where it should be. There's still a lot of reasons that we are where we're at for women to get invested in. I think the foundation of educating more women on what that process is and what you can expect is something that I've been working on, and I know a lot of other great organizations have gotten a lot of information out there. So the good news is that 10 years ago, when you did a Google search about organizations that help women get funding, I don't think that there were that many. There may have been, you could count on one hand. So I have definitely seen a shift, especially with crowdfunding like Republic and iFund with Karen Kahn and all of these organizations that within the last, I'd say 5 years have just been, just rolling out there. So that's great. I mean, I don't have the statistics with me right now on how many women have gotten funding from those organizations, but I know Jumpstart New Jersey and Golden Seeds has now come to New Jersey. So I like that the momentum and that the information is at least accessible. So that's the money. Now, the marketing side of the biggest challenges for women, I have without question seen that more women have become comfortable with showcasing their successes. I mean, we look at LinkedIn and we look at social media, and we know that everybody has to be comfortable talking about what's happening. I mean, I say this all the time, but it's very simple and profound that no one can do business with you if they don't know you exist, right? Like, so I think social media has really shifted shifted that and given men and women permission to talk about their successes, right? So that is something that that 10 years ago was a little bit less permissive. So that's moving in the right direction without question. Then in terms of community, I mean, I know that my organization, and Andy, it sounds like yours, is, you know, I am aware of everyone who I push out there. So if I have an event, I try and make sure that it represents the community at large. And I do notice that a lot of organizations are doing the same thing, which means to me that women should have more access to strong networks, as compared to definitely, you know, 50 years ago, but as compared to 10 years ago. I do see that that has moved in the right direction without question. So do I think that we are where we need to be? Do I think that it's 50-50? Absolutely not. I think that the last, you know, 2 years have really, you know, starting with the hashtag Me Too and all of those, you know, really horrific stories that have unified everyone, if you're going to look at it from a positive side, is really given women especially a unified voice and stepping up and leveling up and just, you know, saying what needs to be said. So you know, I think we're moving in the right direction, and I know that my organization is doing its part to kind of help in whatever way, whatever small way we can. And it certainly sounds like, Andy, you are too. I mean, technology is a huge, it used to be a non-traditional just environment for women altogether, but I know so many women in tech, so it's a great thing for all of us to see that.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Linda. All right, Andy, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think Linda said a lot, and kind of how everything is moving forward and continuing to move forward. The access seems to be opening up a lot. You know, the COVID really impacted and impeded the advancement that the trajectory of advancement that I think a lot of communities were on, dealing with unforeseen circumstances. You know, that's what an entrepreneur does, but these were really, really huge changes in the way everything was happening. And so I think we are seeing certain groups, certain underrepresented groups, specifically women, are in that are, I know that there was a report late last year that was saying that the funding for women entrepreneurs was at the lowest level since 2017. And I think we were seeing that because of the home responsibilities, the childcare responsibilities were falling more on women than the men in the environment. And so I think that we're going to be seeing that impact over time. And you know, now that we recognize that that was an issue, how do we correct it? How do we move forward? How do we, as a community, make sure that it was just a momentary blip and not something that we're going to be course correcting for the next 10 years? And so I think that we need to think about all of that, right? That was just the example of funding for women specifically. But when you look at underrepresented groups as a whole, you know, that means that Black women specifically were impacted at a greater rate, that other underrepresented communities were equally impacted. And so when this was my biggest fear as we were moving into COVID was like, I don't want these networks that were already kind of insular to become even more insular. And that as we were, you know, starting to see the statistics come out, I think that's kind of what we were seeing. Investors were the deal flow was unchanged, and they were moving the investment money through, but who were the companies that they were investing in? There were companies that they knew. There were already existing companies within their portfolio. There were already companies that had access to that capital to begin with. And so new funding, I think, really suffered in a lot of that, in a lot of the last couple of years due to COVID. And I think that's that's where communities like ours can really have a great impact in the conversation, just to make sure that people are aware that these things are happening, that these groups are unequally experiencing things just due to different circumstances. And so I think that conversation, and to Linda's point, is going to continue to be happening. You know, that seems like a really big goal for what Linda's organization is doing. It's very similar to what we're trying to do, have those conversations, facilitate those conversations. The good thing I will say that, you know, Jessica and I were trying to facilitate these conversations in 2013 around diversity, around inclusion, around access to capital. And we were talking to a silo. We were talking to the same, you know, 150 people that were coming to all of those events. And we would see the same people over and over. We would hold a special event on women in technology. We would hold a special event on LGBTQ and technology, or Latinos in technology, or Black women founders. And it was the same people, the same community organizers, the same technologists, the same individuals, the same 150 were at all of those events. And I will say that there's been a shift in the last year of who is attending those events. And I think the conversation, the social justice movement that happened in May of last year, and continues to today, is really impacting the ways that people are having that conversation. I'm seeing a lot more corporations open up their doors and having those candid conversations as well internally. And I think that that's allowing for this conversation to permeate into channels and avenues that it wasn't doing that before. So I do see that as an encouraging trend in the community, and I hope that it continues forward. And some of my biggest champions were reluctant champions before. They've turned into my biggest champions now. And I think that that's a testament to the shift that we're seeing in the conversation as well. And you know, when we do themed events like you know, accessibility tech, or Black Women Founder Spotlight, or Women's Demo Night, it's not just that same community that's pushing that forward. It's these members on my board that before were reluctant to kind of push this initiatives forward are now cheerleading those initiatives every day. And it's really, like, I have to say that transition has really continues to inspire me, and continues to give me hope that the work that we're doing is making change in the communities that we serve.
Thanks for that clarification. That's really insightful, Andy. Now, tell us about New York City. How do you think it's going to be affected, how it's affected right now, and how you think it will come out of the pandemic? You know, there's been different stories out there.
Yeah, I think the whole New York City flight phenomenon was a little bit bloated. I think that, yes, people got scared and people did leave, but I do see a lot of those people returning, and the stories of people returning are increasing every day. I think that the city is going to continue to thrive. There's no better place to live than New York City. It's such a phenomenal city, and you know, I think the diversity of the city is what really drives it forward. What creates this hospitable place to build a business. The talent is there. And I think it's going to come back. I think that all of these things are going to come back in the next couple of years, and it's a great opportunity for the city to really encourage development and growth. And they've been really. I feel like the Economic Development Corporation, the New York City EDC, has been very focused on the different types of businesses that they're looking to bring to New York, about the different verticals that they're setting up within technology to attract new talent, to attract new businesses, to attract the startups to build in New York City. And I think that it's going to continue forward. They've done a really fantastic job as well about supporting minority founders and entrepreneurial journeys. So they've been very intent on creating more programs to create that greater access for the city, for everyone to access the opportunities that exist in the city. And I think that's really what it's all about. How do we retrain the current New Yorkers to be successful within the tech industry? How do we create more opportunities within the tech industry? And how do we make sure that we're moving forward in a very equitable way? With that being said, I think we are, you know, probably a 5-year timeline before we really see kind of how much impact there was due to COVID. We're all playing guessing games right now. I don't think anybody has the right answer, but just from the energy in the last couple of weeks and seeing everybody so excited to be reopening up. And I will tell you that the community there, the fact that we hunkered down, that we took the precautions, that we listened to everything that was given, all the information that was given to us, and being respectful. One of the things that people don't understand about New York is that it is one of the most communally focused cities in the world. And it's because we all have to live with each other. We all have to ride the subway together. We all have to walk the streets together. And so it's really, you don't really realize how strong that communal energy is until something like this happens. And we feel the responsibility to take ownership of our actions. We feel the responsibility to our neighbors, to our fellow New Yorkers, to make sure that we're doing everything we need. And I think that is what's going to get us through this transition, and really what's going to help us rebuild New York City, into what it was, and even better than what it was.
That's great. So before we get to questions, I want to ask, just share one tip for entrepreneurs that you could give them, whether we're in the pandemic or not, in general. Linda?
Oh, me? Okay. So I developed a curriculum, and I'm going to just repeat the whole thing because there's a lot of bits of advice that come along with it. So the curriculum has a lot of M's, so bear with me. It's based in mindset, money, marketing, masterminding, and mentorship. So the mindset part is first, because for all entrepreneurs, and we know that this journey is not necessarily the easiest journey that you could pick. It's often lonely. It's vulnerable. It's isolating, not to scare any budding entrepreneurs out there off, but I think that the mindset part is so important for everyone to take into consideration, because you really need to understand how to invest in self-care and self-mastery, and whatever tools are presented to you. So lots of people like to meditate or to do whatever works for you. But as creators, there's a zone that you must get into to really fulfill your biggest potential. And without that mindset, you won't be able to really balance all the balls that need to be balanced. And so I just really want to stress how important that is. And it's different for everyone, so I don't have the trick for everyone. So that M, then we already talked about the middle M's, but I will also, the other piece of advice is mentorship. I know when I first went out on my own, one of the first things that I did was call up all the smartest people I knew and people that I had great admiration for and respect. And I asked them to be on my advisory board. And I created this, very informal advisory board. And I'm so grateful that I did that, because you want to surround yourself with people that have different strengths and different perspectives, and people who have had some success that can help you along the way get to the level that you're meant to get to. So those are my two pieces of advice.
Great. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I love that mentorship piece. I think it's super, super important that you can't do this alone, and that there's amazing resources and opportunities to ask for that help, and not feel bad about it, right? Like people actually love getting asked for what they think.
Yeah.
So just remember that. And then, my piece of advice is just being tenacious, right? Like making sure that it's not an easy journey. Every day comes with its own challenges, and the lows are low and the highs are high, and you really have to be tenacious about it. And if you're not tenacious about it, then you need to ask yourself, is this the right path for me? Is what I'm building really what I'm passionate about? You have to have that passion, you have to have that drive, you have to have, you're putting in 110% when nobody else is believing in you. And so you really have to drive yourself forward. And it's one of the toughest things for a lot of people to understand, because their first no, you get told a no a lot in this in this journey. And being an entrepreneur, you get told no so much, and it hurts, right? Like at first you're like, what did I do? What was it that I put in this? And you realize, oh, it's not always about me. It's not always about it's just not the right time, or not the right product, or the conversation was not the right conversation, that person was not the right contact, and you start to understand that you're going to get told no all the time, and you have to be okay with being told no all the time. And that tenacity, that drive, that goal that you're working towards really has to push you forward every day. And you have to wake up and want it every day. And when you don't want it every day, like when you don't want it for that day, you need to understand what are the things that are causing you to second guess yourself, that are causing you to lose focus. And to Linda's point, making sure that you have that opportunity for self-care and understanding, and just that opportunity to take a step back, reassess, and then hopefully re-inspire yourself to continue to move forward. But I think that that's the biggest thing that a lot of people don't talk about, right? Like they don't talk about the dark corners of entrepreneurship, the late night conversations that you have with yourself, the self-doubt that eventually leaks into your persona, because you're constantly, pushing a boulder up the hill by yourself. And it's very lonely, and it's very, it can be challenging a lot of times. And so I think that, being vulnerable, being open, finding a community to share, you're not the only one going through it. You're not the only one who's dealing with these issues. I think that is one thing that COVID has shown. It's one thing that boggles my mind every day, is that every person on this earth has been impacted by COVID. Like every single person on this earth has been impacted by COVID. You're not alone. Everybody is going through this challenge. Everybody is going through the struggle. And so how you ask for help really matters, and making sure that you are asking for help really matters. And so tenacity, ask for help, to sum it up.
That's great. And there was a comment that says no stands for next opportunity, which I love. Anyway,
Yes.
well, let's talk about this. Linda, you start. How did each of your organizations pivot during this pandemic? And what did you learn from it? What's worked, what hasn't worked?
Sure. So my organization pivoted. I literally dropped the mic with my last live in-person event. I had the great honor of interviewing Shaka Khan. So at least I went out as a champion with I'm Every Woman, right? So that was fantastic. We had 600 people in Newark. And we had planted the seeds for possibly doing an event, a 3,000 person event in Atlantic City. So we all knew that when the pandemic hit, that 3,000 people weren't going anywhere. So, another part of my business is showcasing thought leaders through print. And I didn't know what was going to happen, but we launched the event with Shaka Khan was called Force for Change. That was the theme. And when we went into the pandemic, we were launching the Force for Change Awards. So we shifted to the Force for Change Awards, honoring men, women, and companies that were doing things to get us through the pandemic and pave a new way for the future. So one of the silver linings that I saw while I was sitting in the pandemic, knowing I was never going to do an event, was that I loved that everybody in the world, basically, like Andy said, we all turned into entrepreneurs overnight. Everybody's like, how am I going to educate my kids? How am I going to get groceries? How am I going to, keep my employees safe? How am I going to, like everybody had to think of how life was going to be from a blank canvas. So the innovation that came out of this pandemic, and trust me, I got hundreds of applications for people who were doing amazing things and doing it almost overnight. So I was really inspired by what took place. And we published one of the biggest sections that I've ever published, in the last 10 years. And so it was interesting that it was almost like an episode of Mad Men too, because print was safe, right? People always say nobody wants to hold a magazine anymore. Everything's online. I've always loved holding magazines, right? So last year was indicative that, print is a real vehicle, especially in a pandemic, right? When you can't get out of the house. So those were some of the things that that happened in my business. We pivoted quick, like the rest of the world, and didn't know how it was going to turn out, and it turned out fantastic. So I was lucky in that regard.
That's great. That's really a great story on how you switch gears, and I love how you highlighted people who were responding to the pandemic. That's brilliant. Andy, what about you?
Yeah, it was. It was not. I think one of the last times we had an in-person event, Jim, it was the rooftop winter celebration, and you and I were in a corner just talking about what is this? What does this mean? How are we going to move forward? And 2 weeks later, we were in lockdown, so it was really intense. But it was. I started to think about what that transition would look like. I think a little bit earlier than a lot of people did, and we had a board meeting on March the 3rd, I believe, or March the 6th, whatever date that was. I had a board meeting that morning and a New York Tech meetup that night, and I was sweating bullets. I was already like, how do we do this? How do we manage this? How do we move it forward? What is the impact for this over time going to be? And I remember doing a brainstorming session with the board that morning about how do we transition to from non-in-person event, and not the entire. There were some people on the board that were just like, "Oh, we're not going to close down. We're going to be fine." I'm like, okay. So that was challenge number one. Challenge number two was when it happened, corporate funding just kind of dried up. Everything just stopped, and it wasn't that. The conversations turned into no's. It was that the conversations were not right now. And for a small organization, that really challenges cash flow and how do you maintain business, especially when a big part of the business is in-person events and the ticket fees from those in-person events, right? You're like, oh crap. But luckily I had started going down this rabbit hole of researching online platforms, virtual platforms, what are the best practices. And one of our amazing community members, Georgie Ann Getton McCoy, she runs GSD with Georgie. She's a virtual event expert and guru. And we had already been having these conversations about virtual event, and the future is virtual, and how do you get more people to. So we were already thinking in that direction and having those conversations. And so when everything happened, I was lucky enough to have her to lean on a bit, and within 2 weeks transition all of our events online and talk about how the formats work and how the formats were going to change. And honestly, we went from doing about 30 events last year, 30 events scheduled. We completed 56 events in 2020. And part of that is just the efficiency of being able to do them virtually. The first couple, I was super nervous. I was like, people are not going to engage. People are not going to know what to do. And as long as you have the right facilitation, people are hungry to connect and network. And so we were able to find a platform to support that and move it forward. And I have to say, spending 6 hours, 2 hours on a meetup versus 6 hours on a meetup is incredibly, like, you're like, oh my gosh, I just gained 4 hours of my day back because I don't have to travel to the venue. I don't have to set up the venue. I don't have to manage the logistics of the venue. And then I don't have to wait for all the attendees to leave, right? So I'm home. I'm not home at midnight. I'm signing off at 8 o'clock. This is phenomenal, right? So it was really that game was game changing for us, and I really just dove headfirst into making sure that we're connecting the community as much as possible, as frequently as possible, because I knew that that is what it would take to continue making sure that we stayed relevant, that the conversation stayed relevant, that we were listening to what people needed, and that we were making sure that we were having different types of conversations as well. Because, you know, the New York Tech Meetup style event isn't perfect for talking about like the struggles of a founder. And so we did a series of events with Grasshopper Bank that was called Don't Panic, Let's Talk. And it was really just a 30-minute session every Thursday that just brought founders together to talk about all the challenges they were facing during that time. So it just really allowed us a lot of opportunity for experimentation, a lot of opportunity for playing with different formats. And it just also created an amazing amount of content that we're still trying to figure out how to the point earlier about marketing, like how do we market it? How do we get it out into the world? And how do we tell our story more? And I think that that's what I learned a lot over this last year.
That's great. And as we plan for the future, right, coming out of this pandemic and everything going hybrid, right? So how do both of you see that in each of your communities? You know, what will things look like? You know, we now we know about the advantages of virtual, how efficient it is. On the other hand, we're craving in-person possibilities. So talk about that, Linda.
So yeah, just to Andy's point, that was, you know, another silver lining is that I did, you know, the awards recognition ceremonies from my living room, and I didn't need to hire a babysitter or pay the tolls to, you know, I mean, it was just very, very efficient. And I was also nervous about how people would respond, but the feedback was fantastic. And there are so many platforms out there that make it really cool to jump around and do virtual tables and all that kind of stuff. So we learned a lot about technology, and it worked well. So the hybrid version, you know, for this year for us, not knowing, you know, how the vaccinations were going to pan out and being in the events business, you know, you already have your year planned, you know, in January. If you're going to have a 400 person event, you sign those contracts back then. So, so for us, we're sticking with virtual events. I actually did do a small 25 person in-person VIP wellness retreat. So we might unfold some of those for the rest of this year. But I think that, you know, 2022 for my organization, I can see some in-person events happening, but definitely keeping the virtual aspect as a part of it, because there's just some events that, like Andy says, the setup, the travel, all of that complication for everyone, for attendees, for the people organizing it, it's just easier to do most events, especially the smaller type, online. So that's what my plan is. How about you, Andy?
Yeah, thank you, Linda. I think to that point, we're going to keep some of our formats. I think we're going to do a lot of experimentation in the next year. You know, it's going to be a lot of throw it at the wall and see what sticks, right? And I think New York specifically, I think we'll have to go into in-person, right? There's just going to be this hunger and this need to connect in a way that that communal piece that I was talking about earlier, that communal thread that exists within New York. And I think New Yorkers are ready and hungry for that type of connection. That being said, I'm not going to rush into it, right? So I want to make sure that we seek what happens. We listen to the city guidelines, that we're doing it safely and healthily, you know, as we return to in-person. But I think, you know, things like the New York Tech Meetup, there is a magic when you're in the room and you get to connect with those startups that are pitching. And the energy that it creates. There is that magic. We were able to create that virtually, but it's just, I don't see that happening with just a virtual space. I think it's gonna have to move back into the in-person and in a hybrid model, right? Like, how do we make sure that we're live streaming and people can connect? We've done this in the past, so how do we make that happen again? And it's great because I saw that decline in virtual participation between 2014 and 2019. So it'd be great to see that uptick again in participation in live streams and people's willingness to tune in for an hour or an hour and a half just to absorb the content. So I love this idea of what the hybrid feature is going to look like. For things like panel conversations, frankly, I really have enjoyed doing them virtually. And is there a reason that we need to put everybody in a room more than once a quarter? So instead of the monthly cadence, maybe we're doing 3 virtual and 1 in person, or some kind of formula like that, so that it's not so that we're offering different types of avenues for people to participate and paths for people to participate in. But honestly, I some of the panels that we've been hosting, the conversation within the virtual piece has been, and the attendance has been phenomenal, because people are able to just tune in for this hour to be witness to this conversation, participate through the Q&A, connect with us after, because we're leaving all of our information in a digital format, and it just makes it easier for those connections to happen. Sometimes I do see that we are, the in-person connections are going to have to happen, but I'm targeting 2022 for a really big push back into that.
Yeah, no, that's really good insights. And I guess I love how you say we're just going to do a lot of experimentation, because I think that's the answer, right? We're going to try a lot of different things coming out of this and really see what sticks. And it will be really interesting and exciting to watch. So let's do this. We usually close out with poems or sayings from both guests. So Linda, why don't you start us off here with
okay, I will. But I have to read this, so I have to put on my readers. I mean, sadly enough, right? And then I have to. So I one of my favorite poems or writings was from Theodore Roosevelt, and it's called "The Man in the Arena." Many have maybe heard of it, but for my purposes today, we are going to read "The Woman in the Arena." So the woman in the arena, it is not the critic who counts, not the woman who points out how the strong person stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the woman who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spend herself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if she fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that her place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. So,
lovely. Thank you, Linda. Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think to Linda's point, one of the quotes that I've been really resonating with lately is from Theodore Roosevelt as well, and it's do what you can with what you have where you are. And I've been looking at that quote almost every day, because it's a reminder, especially during times like this, that you only can do what you can with what you have where you are, right? And everybody is at a different place. Everybody has different resources. Everybody, you only have so much fuel within yourself. So just acknowledging that, understanding that, again, that tenacity piece and asking for help is really what it comes back to. But I think that's that's something, right?
We both think, Andy, you and I are so cut from the same cloth. I mean, I'm so pleased to meet you. We both Theodore Roosevelt quotes.
That is really coincidental.
There was one more quote from Dolores Huerta, and it's about women, and it's, we as women should shine light on our accomplishment and not feel egotistical when we do. It's a way to let the world know that we as women can accomplish great things. And I I look at that quote a lot as well, because my mom is one of the biggest inspirations in my life, my sister as well. I grew up with a lot of women as models, and I really, again, that tenacity is always there. That problem solving piece is always there. And to Linda's point, I don't think that a lot of, I think that that's one of the biggest struggles. It's kind of an inherent thing that I learned, is not to talk about yourself and not to be boastful. You know, you hear that a lot. Don't be boastful, don't be prideful. And I think that that quote really reminds me that, you know, we need to talk about what we do and recognize the accomplishments that we have.
That is a great way to end. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Linda. Thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please like it, leave a review, and subscribe. See you soon.